What's up guys, we're back at it again. Just like old tradition, Conor McGregor gave out his reaction to his fight with Dustin Poirier. He seems to always do this after his fights, especially his losses. So we're gonna go through everything he said and give our thoughts about it. Quote, "Some highlights from my last fight. What a trilogy I have now on my hands. Exciting. With a handle on the leg kicks, I'll get back to having fun in there. I was in second gear, cruising this fight. Best condition I've ever been in. After the wrestling and clinch exchanges, my shots still held their pop. First time for me with this, so I'm very encouraged to keep going. It was the first time I did not use nor need the stool between rounds also. I did need the stool after though, that's for sure." And then it just talks about like sponsors and things he used to recover with, if you're interested in that recovery spray. "I'm extremely happy I did not use the stool between rounds here anyway. Another first for me. I am most certainly on the right path. Despite the loss, I am on the correct path of evolution." Unquote. Hey man, this might be a scary Conor McGregor we have here. So he's upbeat, he's very positive, he's looking to learn from the fight instead of dwelling on things and excuses like he has done in the past. This is a very good mentality, don't get it mistaken. The only way this could be a bad mentality is if he kind of has one foot out the door. I don't think that's the case. I think he's taken that win or learn motto to even greater lengths. Like, he's not looking at anything negative of the fight. He's very happy for the experience and he's going to address and fix things going into a trilogy, which he obviously wants. So because he's not looking at anything negative about the fight, he's only looking to learn as a student and get back right in there. That's an amazing mentality to have, and it's not easy for a fighter to minimize their ego in order to do that. And he did say he is on the correct path of evolution. He knows from here he's only going to get better, which is again amazing to hear. But there's two other things that he specifically mentioned. Of course, the leg kicks. He said with a handle on the leg kicks, he'll get back to having fun in there. Most likely believes if he fixes that mistake, if he defends the leg kicks in our trilogy, he would have a much better chance of beating Dustin Poirier. But he seems most happy about his cardio. He was not tired in the fight. It almost went 2 rounds. You tend to usually see Conor slow down in the second round, and that wasn't present in the fight, even though his leg was getting damaged and he was getting punched in the face. So we could say his cardio is probably a little bit better than before, but it's still too short of a fight to really give a big statement about it, you know? He also did not need a stool. The first time in his career, he was standing up in between rounds. Now, that doesn't always mean that you're not tired, obviously. In fact, all athletes are taught not to sit down after being exhausted or right after an event or something like that. They tell them, run it off, stand up, don't sit down. Because when you sit down, you build up a lot of lactic acid in your legs and your heart rate can drop a bit, and then it will spike when you get back into the next round. That can also do a number on your cardio. You will not come out in the next round the same way. So I do think it's really good for all fighters to not sit down as much as possible. I understand if you're so exhausted you can't really stand anymore, then of course you gotta do what you gotta do. Sit on the stool and get back in there, let your heart take you into that round. But we all know what Conor McGregor is saying here. He usually takes the stool when he's tired. He didn't do that here. And then he continues, quote, "Thoughts on the bout. I enjoyed racking up some more time inside the famed octagon. 40 seconds in 3 years is all I had up until this bout. I was savoring every second and enjoying my work. A little single disciplined in my approach and stance with mostly boxing." Very glad he pointed that out. "It's what I get for picking this fight, an opponent as a precursor to a boxing match against Pac-Man. I deserve to get the legs kicked off me going in with this thinking. This is not the game to play around with. Besides with this though, my shots were sharp and I was in full control. But the leg kicks were building up on me throughout the course. 18 in total thrown at me, with the final one buckling my leg fully. That was that. The peroneal nerve compromised. Fascinating. First time to experience it. Then a tremendous finishing flurry by my opponent. Hats off, a well-fought fight by the Diamond. One apiece now, with a trilogy bout for all the marbles. Wow, exciting. Not a trilogy I was expecting, nor the tactical affair I was anticipating, but I'd be lying if I said this wasn't meant to be. This is exactly how this was always meant to be. Buzzing." Unquote. Man, wholesome Conor McGregor is not a joke. The guy's extremely optimistic. First thing he mentioned was he wanted to rack up the time in the cage. He only fought 40 seconds in the last 3 years, and he wanted to savor every second and enjoy his work in there. Now, this for sure does not mean he wasn't trying to finish Dustin Poirier or hurt him or anything like that. He landed some big shots in the first round that would knock out a lot of people, but Dustin took them. But maybe not being as aggressive as even Poirier said that Conor should have been might have been the thing that he's pointing to, quote unquote, enjoying his work. Whenever he hit Dustin Poirier, he didn't really capitalize right afterward. It seemed like he was taking pictures whenever he landed on Poirier. But of course, he is putting a little bit of an excuse of not having fought in so long, 40 seconds to 3 years. That is a real excuse you can actually make, but people don't like to hear that from the fighter, obviously. He most likely believes because he had the experience of fighting almost 2 rounds, he will be sharper in a trilogy because of the longer mat time. Then this is the one a lot of people wanted to know about. Conor addresses his boxing stance and his boxing-oriented style in the fight. He literally says here he underestimated Dustin Poirier, 100%. He said he used this as a precursor to a boxing match with Pac-Man. That is overlooking your opponent extremely. That is essentially looking at this fight almost like a sparring match for the real fight that is Pacquiao. And he said he deserved what happened to him because of that. So we all know he said this before the fight as well. This is not something new. Conor said before the fight that he was using this fight to ready himself for Pacquiao because Dustin Poirier is a good boxer, he's a combination puncher, and most importantly, he's a southpaw fighter, same as Pacquiao. Overlooking Dustin Poirier and acknowledging that he got what he got because of it, most likely will show that Conor will come back in the trilogy a lot sharper. Does that mean he will beat Dustin Poirier in a rematch? No, not at all, because Dustin will probably be a lot more motivated in the trilogy as well. Regardless though, Conor liked the way he was throwing his punches, he liked the way he was moving in there. He said he was in full control of the fight, which is not necessarily true. He was in control for like the first 3 minutes or so, then the ties started changing a little bit. Does this mean we're going to see the bouncy Conor McGregor, the karate Conor McGregor in a trilogy fight? Most likely we'll see more kicks from him, most likely we'll see more movement from him, but I don't see the stance being entirely different, because if you notice Conor McGregor fighting Nate Diaz in the rematch, he also didn't take too much of a karate stance or bouncy footwork or anything like that, because he's fighting a southpaw fighter. So moving back away from punches when you're fighting someone in the same stance and trying to use the same kind of movement that you do against an orthodox fighter can cause a bit of confusion for that southpaw, because Conor doesn't fight a lot of southpaws. And whenever he does, he tends to get in more trouble than usual. Dustin Poirier's jabs were landing on him. When do you ever see someone throwing jabs and landing on Conor McGregor that isn't a southpaw fighter? Only southpaws are landing jabs on Conor because they are in the same stance. The jab from Dustin Poirier, I believe, could be a bigger weapon in the trilogy than it was in this fight. Remember when Dustin was popping him with a jab and then pointing at him afterward like, hey, I got you. And Conor has built his career around slipping the right hand of his opponent and then countering with his own left. That usually comes with orthodox fighters, not from southpaws. Dustin could potentially put himself in that danger like I talked about before, where he switched into orthodox and threw the big right hand, but Conor didn't seem to be ready to counter that because of the early takedown. And that is something Conor is not addressing that much. He was talking about after wrestling and clinching with Poirier, he still had the cardio to keep going. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't address the takedown, right? Because he got taken to the ground very, very early, and he also didn't address Dustin Poirier's counter punches, especially that check right hook, because that check right hook was money on Conor. Landed early and landed late. Conor really needs to also address that takedown, because the switch stance takedown is something that a lot of fighters don't do. I mean, we see TJ Dillashaw throwing that out there, but not a lot of other notable names. Dustin did it here, and it was very successful. The switch triggers that long left counter shot from Conor McGregor, and the takedown goes under it, catching the overextended Conor completely off balance. Obviously, Conor McGregor wants that trilogy. Obviously, he's pushing for it. He says he's excited about it, and the fact that Dustin wants to be on board means that this fight is probably going to happen. I hope it's not for a title. I'm glad Conor didn't talk about a title in his post here. If there's a title going to be fought for, Charles Oliveira and Dustin Poirier have to both be in there. All in all, it's a good summary of the fight for Conor McGregor. It was honest, not really a lot of excuses or excuses that are faulty. A lot of things he said was actually true in the fight. His mentality and all that stuff, a lot of the speculation seemed to be true about Conor McGregor, and he addressed those and accepted the results of them. He knows now he's going to evolve and get better from this and show up in the trilogy a lot better. We might see the best Conor McGregor we've ever seen, but how many times do we hear that? Dustin Poirier is definitely going to be the best Dustin Poirier in the trilogy as well. Don't get mistaken about that.